The community center was a blaze of Christmas lights, their golden glow clashing with the ice in my veins. I, Nora Callahan, 32, bank teller by day and math tutor by night, stood by the dessert table, my fingers arranging my grandfather's pecan pie, its caramelized scent a fragile tether to his memory. My mother's voice cut through the festive hum like a blade through silk. "Nora, you're nothing but a parasite, leeching off this family's good name," she declared, her words ringing out across the Indiana town's annual Christmas party. The room froze, the clink of hot cocoa mugs halting, the laughter of neighbors, Mrs. Delaney, Mr. Coleman, families I'd known since I was a girl, swallowed by a stunned silence. My mother, Ellen Harper, stood in her red sweater, her face a mask of righteous fury, as if she'd rehearsed this public execution. My father hovered behind her, his eyes fixed on the floor, his silence a familiar betrayal. My sister, Marianne, lingered in the corner, her lips curling into a smirk that didn't reach her eyes, a calculated glint flickering in her gaze like a spark in the dark. The word parasite was a lash, stripping me bare before the town. For 5 years, I'd poured my life into 2 jobs, my banker's precision and tutor's patience funneled into saving our family home, the 2-story haven where my grandfather had carved wooden stars and told tales by the fire. Every paycheck, every sleepless night, had been for them, to keep the house that held his laughter, his lessons. Yet here I stood, flayed open, my sacrifice twisted into shame. The community's stares were a weight, their whispers a jagged chorus. Mrs. Delaney, who'd taught me to knit when I was 10, clutched her scarf, her eyes wide with shock. Mr. Coleman, the librarian who'd slipped me extra books, adjusted his glasses, his face unreadable. A young couple I'd tutored last year exchanged glances, their pity sharp as a needle. I wanted to scream the truth, how I'd paid their mortgage, how I'd given up my own dreams, but my throat closed, the words caged behind my teeth. Marianne's smirk held my gaze, its edge colder than the December air outside. What did she know that I didn't? Her confidence wasn't just cruelty. It was a signal, a secret she held like a trump card. My hands trembled, but I forced them to steady, setting the pie plate down with deliberate care, the porcelain cool against my palms. "Enjoy the pie," I said, my voice steady, though it quaked inside. "It's my grandfather's recipe, made with his old pecans." The crowd murmured, eager to escape the awkwardness, but their glances lingered, a mix of sympathy and curiosity that stung worse than scorn. My mother turned away, her performance complete, her red sweater a splash of color in the festive blur. My father shuffled toward the punch table, his shoulders hunched, avoiding my eyes as if I were a stranger. Marianne's smirk lingered as she sipped her drink, her posture too relaxed, too certain, her manicured nails tapping the glass in a rhythm that felt like a countdown. My banker's instinct, honed by years of spotting discrepancies in ledgers, flared. That smirk wasn't just spite, it was knowledge, a piece of a puzzle she thought I'd never solved. I slipped through the crowd, their carols a hollow drone in my ears, and stepped into the snowy night. The town square's Christmas lights twinkled, their warmth a cruel mockery of the ache in my chest. My mother's words weren't just an outburst, they were a calculated strike, meant to keep me small, to shift the town's gaze from her own failings. Marianne's smirk was the real clue, a hint she knew something about the house I'd fought to save. My grandfather's oak jewelry box, his gift to his steady star, waited in my apartment, holding every mortgage receipt, proof of my sacrifice. But now, I wondered if it held more, a key to their betrayal, a secret tied to the house or the town itself. I'd always been the reliable one, the one who stayed, who paid, while Marianne was the golden child, her law degree a crown my mother polished at every gathering. I remembered a Christmas long ago, my grandfather handing me a carved star, his hands rough from years in his workshop. "This town needs steady hands, Nora," he'd said, his eyes warm with trust. Had he seen this coming? Had he left me something to fight with? The snow crunched under my boots as I paused under a street lamp, its light casting shadows on my coat. The community's traditions, lights strung across the square, carols echoing from the center, pies shared over stories, were supposed to bind us, but tonight, they'd become a stage for my humiliation. My mother's accusation was a distraction, a way to paint me as the burden while she and Marianne maneuvered behind the scenes. But why? What was worth this public shaming? Marianne's smirk flashed in my mind, her eyes too knowing, too smug. I thought of her, years ago, after my grandfather's funeral, hovering over his desk, her hands quick to close a drawer when I entered. I'd thought she was grieving, but now I saw it differently, her fingers searching, her gaze too sharp. The jewelry box, the receipts, that moment, they were fragments of a truth I'd been too trusting to see. The cold sharpened my thoughts, my breath visible in the night air. My mother thought she'd silenced me, but she'd only lit a fire. My sister thought she'd outsmarted me, but her smirk was a misstep, a crack in her armor. I'd always been good at numbers, at seeing patterns others missed, clients' accounts, students' mistakes. Now, I'd use that to unravel their game. The community's whispers would spread this night, their gossip a wildfire I could harness. My mother's words had meant to break me, but they'd only woken me up. I wasn't just their anchor, I was their reckoning. What kind of family calls their own a parasite after years of sacrifice? I'd find out, and they'd learn what happens when you underestimate the one who's been holding everything together. As I walked home, the town's Christmas lights faded into the dark, but another memory surfaced, my grandfather's voice. Low and steady, telling me stories of the town's history, of people who rose from betrayal to rebuild. He'd always believed in me, his steady star, and I'd clung to that through years of being overlooked. The jewelry box waited, its contents a ledger of my loyalty but maybe also a weapon. My mother and Marian thought they'd won this round, but I was already calculating my next move. The community had seen me as a shadow tonight, but I'd make them see the truth. My hands clenched in my pockets, the cold biting my knuckles. This wasn't just about the house, it was about who I was, and who I'd become when I turned their betrayal against them. If this betrayal has you reeling, subscribe to see how I fight back. What would you do if your family turned on you like this? The faint scent of old wood and dust clung to my apartment, a stark contrast to the festive glow I'd left behind at the community center. I sat on the edge of my bed, my grandfather's oak jewelry box open before me, its hinges groaning like a whisper from the past. My fingers sifted through the mortgage receipts, each slip a marker of 5 years spent saving the house where he'd carved stars and spun stories by the fire. My mother's words still stung, but it was the memory of my sister's calculated confidence that drove me to dig deeper. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. My banker's instinct told me to gather evidence first, to find the crack in her armor. The receipts were proof of my sacrifice, but they weren't enough to explain why my family had turned on me so publicly. My hands paused over a small velvet pouch tucked beneath the papers, its weight heavier than it should have been. I untied the drawstring, and a brass key slid into my palm, its edges worn but intricate, etched with a faint pattern of vines. It didn't match any lock I knew, not my apartment, not the family home. My pulse quickened, a familiar thrill from spotting an anomaly in a client's account. This key was no accident. My grandfather didn't keep meaningless things. He'd been meticulous, his workshop shelves lined with tools labeled in his precise handwriting. Had he hidden something, knowing I'd find it? The thought sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of purpose. The town's Christmas lights still danced in my memory, but this key felt like a counterpoint, a quiet promise of answers. I stood, pacing the small room, the key cold against my skin. My mother's accusation had been a spectacle, but spectacles hide truths. My father's silence, his eyes averted, was complicity, but in what? And my sister, Marianne, her poised demeanor at the party wasn't just arrogance, it was certainty, as if she held a winning hand. I needed more than receipts to unravel their game. The community's whispers, their shocked faces at the party, were a reminder. This town thrived on secrets, passed over hot cocoa and carols. I'd grown up here, watched neighbors swap stories at Christmas barbecues, but I'd never thought to look beneath their warmth. Now, I saw it differently. Their traditions, their unity, could mask lies as easily as they built bonds. The phone buzzed on my nightstand, snapping me back. It was Clara, the postal worker who'd always slipped extra stamps to my grandfather when he mailed his carved ornaments to distant cousins. "Nora," she said, her voice low, urgent, "I heard what happened at the party. You need to watch your sister. She's been asking about the house, papers, ownership, things she shouldn't care about." I gripped the key tighter, my mind racing. Clara's words weren't gossip. They were a warning, delivered in the same hushed tone she used to share news of a neighbor's illness. "Thanks, Clara," I said, keeping my voice even, though my heart pounded. "I'll look into it." She hesitated, then added, "Your grandfather always said you'd hold things together. Don't let them take that from you." Her words hit like a spark, igniting memories of my grandfather's steady hands, his belief in me as his steady star. I sat again, the key glinting in the lamplight. Clara's warning was a piece of the puzzle, but it wasn't the whole picture. My sister's interest in the house wasn't new, she'd always coveted it, her law degree a ticket to a bigger life than this small Indiana town. But why now? Why push my mother to humiliate me so publicly? I thought of my grandfather's funeral, the way Marian had lingered in his study, her fingers brushing his desk as if searching for something. I'd been too buried in grief to question it then, but now it felt deliberate, like she'd been hunting for this key, or what it unlocked. The house was more than a home, it was a symbol, a legacy my grandfather had poured his heart into. Had he left something to protect it, something my family wanted to bury? I slipped the key into my pocket, its weight a quiet anchor. My banker's mind, trained to spot patterns, was already working. The house, the receipts, Clara's warning, they were threads in a web I'd been too trusting to see. My mother's outburst wasn't just cruelty, it was a diversion, a way to keep me off balance. My father's silence wasn't weakness, it was agreement, a choice to let me carry their burdens. And Marianne, she wasn't just ambitious, she was calculating, her every move a step towards some hidden goal. The community's Christmas traditions, their shared pies and songs, had always felt like a warm embrace, but now I saw their underbelly, gossip that could destroy, secrets that could bind or break. I'd been their reliable Nora, the one who paid, who stayed. But reliable didn't mean weak. I moved to the window, the town square's lights faint in the distance, snow falling like a curtain. My grandfather's voice echoed, his stories of the town's resilience, of people who rose from betrayal. He'd trusted me to see what others missed, to hold steady when things fell apart. This key was my first clue, a piece of his legacy I hadn't yet understood. I thought of Clara's call, her voice trembling with loyalty. The community wasn't just a backdrop, it was a witness, and I'd need its eyes to expose my family's lies. My mother thought she'd shamed me into submission, but she'd only sharpened my resolve. Marianne thought she'd outplayed me, but this key was my opening move. What kind of family buries their own to protect a secret? I'd find out, and they'd learn the cost of underestimating me. The county records office smelled of stale coffee and old paper, its fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow on the linoleum floor. I stood at the counter, my fingers tracing the edge of a manila folder, the brass key from my grandfather's box heavy in my pocket. My banker's instinct, honed by years of spotting discrepancies, had driven me here, chasing the thread Clara's warning had unraveled. My family's betrayal was no longer just a wound, it was a puzzle, and I was determined to piece it together. Sarah Delaney, the clerk who'd once helped me notarize a loan for a neighbor, slid a document across the counter, her eyes flickering with unease. "This is the deed to your family's house," she said, her voice low, as if the walls could listen. I opened the folder, my breath catching as I saw the names listed, my mother, my father, and, in fresh ink, Marianne. My sister's name, added without my knowledge, was a punch to the gut, a silent theft of the home I'd spent 5 years saving. My mind raced, calculating the implications like I would a client's overdrawn account. The house, where my grandfather had carved wooden ornaments and taught me to balance numbers, was supposed to be ours, a shared legacy. Yet Marianne's name on the deed was no mistake, it was a move, deliberate and cold. Sarah shifted, her fingers twisting a pen. "It was amended last month," she said, avoiding my gaze. "I thought you knew." Her words were a spark, igniting a fire of suspicion. Last month? That was weeks before the Christmas party, before my mother's public attack. My sister had been planning this, and my parents had let her. My father's averted eyes, my mother's sharp control, they weren't just complicity, they were part of the design. But why? What did Marianne gain by claiming the house I'd fought to keep? I forced my voice to stay even, my tutor's patience masking the storm inside. "Who filed the amendment?" I asked, my eyes locked on Sarah's. She hesitated, her lips parting, then whispered, "Your sister came in with your mother. They had all the paperwork." The betrayal deepened, a knife twisting in my chest. My mother, the woman who'd raised me to be dependable, had signed away my sacrifice. My father, silent as always, had stood by. I thought of the key, its vine-etched surface, a mystery I hadn't yet solved. Was it tied to this? Had my grandfather known they'd try to erase me? His stories of the town, of loyalty and resilience, echoed in my mind, urging me to dig deeper. I stepped back, clutching the folder, my mind already mapping the next move. The community's Christmas traditions, lights, carols, shared warmth, felt distant now, a facade hiding secrets. This town thrived on gossip, and I'd heard whispers at the diner about Marianne's ambitions, her polished smiles at town meetings. Was the house just a stepping stone for her? I needed to know more, to find the lock this key opened. Sarah's voice broke my thoughts. "Nora, be careful," she said, her tone heavy with something unspoken. "There's more to this than the deed." Her warning was a jolt, like catching a forged signature on a check. More? What else had my family hidden? I left the office, the folder tucked under my arm, the winter air biting my cheeks as I crossed the town square. The Christmas lights still hung, their glow mocking my isolation. I thought of confronting my father, the man who stayed silent, in the garage where we'd once polished my grandfather's tools. "Why is Marianne on the deed?" I imagined asking, picturing his nervous fidgeting, his excuses. But I stopped myself. Confrontation without evidence was a rookie mistake, and I wasn't a rookie. My banker's training taught me to verify before acting, to trace every number to its source. The deed was a clue, but the key was my edge, a piece my family didn't know I had. I slipped into the diner, the bell above the door jingling, drawing glances from familiar faces. Mrs. Delaney sat in a corner booth, her knitting needles paused. Her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of concern. Mr. Coleman, at the counter, looked up from his coffee, his gaze sharp, as if he'd heard the town's whispers too. The diner was a hub, a place where Christmas plans were made and secrets spilled. I ordered a coffee, my hand steady despite the storm inside, and listened to the hum of conversation. A woman at the next table mentioned Marianne, her voice low. She's been talking to developers, you know, about that old house. My grip tightened on the mug, the heat grounding me. Developers? The house wasn't just a home, it was my grandfather's legacy, the heart of our family's story. Was Marianne planning to sell it? I paid and left, the folder and key my only anchors. My sister's ambition wasn't just personal, it was calculated, a plan to reshape the town's view of her while erasing my role. My mother's manipulation, my father's silence, they were pieces of her puzzle, not mine. But the deed's amendment was a bold move, one that required more than just signatures. It required intent, a betrayal so deep it shook the foundation of everything I'd believed about family. I thought of my grandfather, his steady hands guiding mine as we strung Christmas lights, his voice promising I'd always have a place. Had he left the key to protect me, to ensure I'd fight back? The square was quiet now, the snow muffling the world. I stood under a street lamp, the deed's weight heavy in my hands. Sarah's warning echoed, there's more to this. The community, with its traditions and gossip, was watching, but they didn't know the whole story. I'd been the one who paid, who stayed, while Marianne built her image on my sacrifice. But I wasn't invisible anymore. The key in my pocket was a promise, a link to something my family wanted buried. My banker's mind was already working, piecing together the clues, calculating the cost of their betrayal. They thought they'd outmaneuvered me, but they'd only shown their hand. What kind of family rewrites their own to claim what's not theirs? I'd find out, and they'd face the truth I'd uncover. The library's quiet was a stark contrast to the storm inside me, its shelves heavy with the scent of aged books and wax polish. I clutched the brass key and the deeds folder, my mind still reeling from the county office's revelation. Marianne's name, inked onto the house I'd saved, was a calculated theft. Now, standing in the archive room, I faced Mr. Coleman, the librarian who'd known my grandfather's every quirk. His glasses glinted as he pulled a safety deposit box from a locked cabinet, his hand steady but his voice low. Your grandfather left this for you, he said, sliding the box across the table. He made me promise to wait until you came looking. My fingers brushed the cold metal, the key's vine pattern a perfect match for the lock. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with certainty. This was no coincidence. My grandfather had planned for this moment, as if he'd seen my family's betrayal coming. The lock clicked, and the box opened to reveal a single document, its edges yellowed but the ink sharp, my grandfather's will. I scanned the words, my banker's precision catching every detail. He'd named me, not my parents or my sister, as the guardian of the family home and a fund for the town's Christmas traditions. My breath caught, a wave of validation crashing against the ache of betrayal. My mother and Marianne had known, they'd hidden this, buried my grandfather's wishes to keep me tethered to their lies. Mr. Coleman's eyes softened, but his words were sharp. Your sister's been asking around, Nora, about selling the house, developers, big plans. She thinks the town's hers to charm. His words were a jolt, like catching a forged check mid-transaction. Selling? The house wasn't just a home. It was my grandfather's legacy, the heart of our family story, and I'd poured 5 years of my life into it. My fingers tightened on the will, its weight heavier than the deed. This wasn't just about ownership, it was about intent, a deliberate erasure of my role. My mother's control, my father's silence, Marianne's ambition, they'd conspired to rewrite my place in this family. But why hide the will? Why go to such lengths? I thought of the key, its discovery a quiet gift from my grandfather, and now this document, his voice reaching through time. Mr. Coleman leaned forward, his voice a whisper. There's talk in the town, Nora. Marianne's been cozying up to council members, promising them a new community center if she sells. Your grandfather's fund, it's not just for Christmas lights. It's bigger. My mind raced, piecing together the clues like a ledger's hidden errors. A fund? Was that what Marianne was after, not just the house? I folded the will, slipping it into my coat, my tutor's calm masking the fire inside. Thank you, Mr. Coleman, I said, my voice steady despite the storm. He nodded, his gaze heavy with unspoken loyalty. Your grandfather always said you'd see what others missed. Don't let them take that from you. His words echoed Clara's warning. A reminder that the community wasn't just a backdrop, it was a witness, its gossip a weapon I could wield. I stepped into the main library, where patrons flipped through books, their murmurs a soft hum. A woman at a nearby table glanced up, her eyes lingering. Word of my family's drama was spreading, the town's Christmas warmth now laced with Suspicion, outside, the winter air stung my cheeks as I crossed the square, the will and key my armor. I imagined confronting my mother, the woman who'd raised me to be dutiful, in her pristine kitchen. Why hide the will? I'd ask, watching her falter, her excuses crumbling. But I held back. My banker's training demanded evidence, not emotion. The will was a bombshell, but I needed more to expose their full plan. Marianne's council connections, the developers, the fund, they were pieces of a larger scheme. I thought of my father, tinkering in his garage, his silence a shield for their secrets. Had he known about the will too? His avoidance wasn't just weakness, it was guilt. I slipped into the diner, the bell jingling, drawing eyes from familiar faces. Mrs. Delaney, knitting in a booth, paused, her needles still, her gaze warm but probing. Another patron, a man who'd bought my grandfather's ornaments, whispered to his wife, their glances darting my way. The town was talking, their Christmas traditions, lights, carols, shared pies, now a stage for my fight. I ordered a tea, my hand steady, and listened to the chatter. Marianne's got big plans, a woman said, her voice low. Says the house could fund a new town project. My grip tightened on the cup, the heat grounding me. A project? That was her angle, use my grandfather's legacy to build her own. I left the diner, the will's words burned into my mind, I was the guardian, not Marianne. My sister's charm, her law degree, her council meetings, they were a facade, a plan to profit from my sacrifice. My mother's manipulation, my father's complicity, they'd buried the will to keep me in the dark. But my grandfather had seen me, trusted me. The key had led me here, to this truth, and it wasn't just about the house. The fund, whatever it was my grandfather's gift to the town, and Marianne wanted to claim it. I stood under the square's Christmas lights. Their glow no longer warm but sharp, like my resolve. The community's whispers were growing, their loyalty shifting. I'd been their reliable one, the one who paid, who stayed. Now, I'd be their truth teller. The library's quiet had given me clarity, but the town's hum was my battlefield. My sister thought she'd outplayed me, her name on the deed a checkmate. But the will was my counter, a move she hadn't seen coming. My mother thought she'd silenced me, but she'd only sharpened my focus. The bank's vault was a cold fortress, its steel walls amplifying the thud of my pulse as I stood before an open safety deposit box. My grandfather's will, naming me guardian of the house and a town fund, was folded in my coat, a secret my family had buried. The brass key, the deed's betrayal, Mr. Coleman's warning about Marianne's plans, they'd led me here, to the bank where I'd spent years balancing other people's lives. My manager, Mr. Hayes, handed me a sealed envelope from my grandfather's account, his expression tight. This came up when we audited old records, he said, his voice low. Your mother requested access last year, but your grandfather locked it to your name only. I tore it open, revealing a loan agreement, its numbers stark. My mother had borrowed against the house years ago, a debt she'd never disclosed, time to keep me paying. Trapped in a cycle of sacrifice, the paper trembled in my hands, not from fear but fury, contained like a storm behind my banker's calm. My mother, the woman who'd raised me to be dutiful, had engineered this debt to bind me, ensuring my paychecks flowed into her hands while Marianne's star rose. The loan's date, 6 years ago, aligned with my first mortgage payment, a coincidence too precise to be chance. My father's silence, his averted eyes, wasn't just cowardice, it was collusion, letting me carry their burden. I thought of my sister, her polished charm at town meetings, her name on the deed, a plan built on my labor. My grandfather's will had named me protector, but this loan was a chain, forged to keep me invisible. Had he known? His steady hands, guiding mine over ledgers, felt like a warning now, urging me to see the truth. I tucked the loan document into my coat, my mind racing like it did when spotting a client's hidden debt. Mr. Hayes lingered, his fingers tapping the counter. Nora, there's talk, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Your sister's been meeting with developers, saying the house could fund a new town project. People are listening. His words hit like a ledger's red ink, confirming Mr. Coleman's warning. Marianne wasn't just stealing the house, she was leveraging it for power, using my grandfather's legacy to climb. The community's Christmas traditions, lights, carols, shared warmth, were her stage, her promises of progress a mask for greed. My mother's loan wasn't just manipulation, it was a foundation for Marianne's scheme, keeping me tethered. While they reshaped the town's future. I left the vault, the bank's hum fading as I stepped into the winter air. The town square's lights twinkled, a cruel reminder of the community's gaze. I imagined confronting my mother in her pristine kitchen, holding up the loan agreement. Why keep this from me? I'd ask, watching her falter, her excuses crumbling like old paper. But my tutor's patience held me back, confrontation without strategy was a loss. The will, the deed, the loan, they were pieces, but not the whole puzzle. I needed more, something to tie Marianne's plans to my mother's debt. My grandfather's voice echoed, his stories of the town's resilience, of people who rose from betrayal. He'd locked this envelope to my name, knowing I'd find it, knowing I'd fight. I slipped into the community center, its walls still lined with Christmas garlands, the air heavy with the scent of pine. A group of neighbors planned the winter festival, their voices low, but their eyes flicked to me, Mrs. Delaney's warm, Mr. Coleman's knowing. The town was talking, their whispers a current I could steer. A woman at a table mentioned Marianne, her tone sharp, she's promising a new center if she sells that house. My grip tightened on my coat, the loan document crinkling. A new center? That was the fund's purpose, twisted to serve my sister's ambition. My mother's loan had kept me paying, but Marianne's plan was to profit, to erase me while building her name. I ordered a coffee at the counter, my hand steady despite the fire inside. The community wasn't just a witness, it was a jury, their loyalty wavering as rumors spread. I thought of my father, tinkering in his garage, his silence a shield for their lies. Had he signed off on the loan too? His avoidance was a confession, a refusal to face me. Marianne's meetings with developers, her counsel promises, they were bold, but sloppy. She thought I'd stay quiet, crushed by my mother's manipulation. But the loan agreement was my weapon, proof of a betrayal deeper than the deed. My grandfather had seen me, trusted me to protect his legacy. The fund wasn't just for Christmas lights, it was for the town's heart, and I wouldn't let Marianne steal it. I stepped back into the cold, the square's lights casting long shadows. My mother's loan was a trap, set to keep me small, but it was also a mistake, a paper trail I could follow. My sister's plans, my father's complicity, they were unraveling, thread by thread. The community's whispers were growing, their Christmas spirit now a demand for truth. I'd been the one who paid, who stayed, while my family built their facade on my back. But I wasn't their pawn anymore. The will named me guardian, the loan exposed their lies, and I was closing in. The post office was a quiet hum of sorting machines and rustling paper, its counter worn from years of letters passing through. I stood there, clutching the loan agreement that exposed my mother's manipulation, my grandfather's will a heavy weight in my coat. The town's whispers about Marianne's plans, developers, a new community center, had fueled my resolve. But I needed more to unravel her scheme. Clara, the postal worker who'd warned me about my sister's inquiries, approached with a hesitant step, her eyes darting to the door. Nora, she whispered, sliding a crumpled envelope across the counter, this came for you. It's from a hospital, addressed to your sister, but it was misdelivered to my route. My fingers brushed the paper, the hospital's logo stark against the smudged ink. I opened it, my banker's precision scanning the numbers, Marianne's medical bills, staggering and unpaid, dated months before she'd pushed to sell the house. My breath caught, not from shock but from clarity, like spotting a hidden deficit in a ledger. My sister's ambition wasn't just greed, it was desperation. A secret she'd buried to protect her polished image. The bills explained her rush to claim the house, her name on the deed, her council meetings, all moves to erase my sacrifice and fund her debts. My mother's loan, time to keep me paying, was part of this too, a scaffold for Marianne's survival. I thought of my father, his silence in the garage, his tools clinking as he avoided my gaze. Had he known about her bills? His complicity wasn't just passive, it was protective, shielding Marianne while I carried their weight. Clara's voice broke my thoughts. She's been hiding this, Nora. The town doesn't know. Her words were a spark, igniting my resolve to expose the truth. I tucked the envelope into my coat, my tutor's calm masking the fire inside. The hospital bills were a crack in Marianne's facade, proof her charm was a lie. But there was more. Clara's hesitation, her quick glance at the door, hinted at deeper secrets. There's something else, she said, her voice barely audible. I overheard Marianne at the town hall, talking about a developer's offer. She mentioned splitting profits with someone close. My pulse quickened, my mind racing like it did when auditing a client's account. Splitting profits? With whom? My mother's loan, the hidden will, now this, my family's betrayal was a web, and I was untangling it thread by thread. Clara's loyalty, her quiet delivery of this envelope, was a lifeline, tying me to the community's pulse. I stepped outside, the winter air sharp against my cheeks. The town square's Christmas lights glowed, their warmth a stark contrast to the cold truth in my hands. I imagined confronting Marianne at her next council meeting, holding up the hospital bill. Is this why you're selling our legacy? I'd ask, watching her falter, her charm crumbling before the town. But my banker's instinct held me back, evidence without strategy was a gamble. The will named me guardian, the loan exposed my mother's trap, and now these bills revealed Marianne's desperation. I needed to connect them, to find that someone close she was scheming with. My grandfather's stories of the town's resilience, told by the fire, echoed in my mind. He'd trusted me to see what others missed, to protect what he'd built. I walked to Mrs. Delaney's porch, where she sat knitting under a string of Christmas lights, her needles clicking in rhythm. She'd known my grandfather, shared his love for the town's traditions, carols, shared pies, ornaments exchanged at the festival. Her eyes met mine, warm but sharp, as if she sensed the storm I carried. "Nora," she said, setting her knitting aside, "the town's talking about your sister's plans. They're starting to see her for what she is." Her words were a balm, a sign the community's loyalty was shifting. I nodded, my voice steady. "They'll see more soon, Mrs. Delaney." She smiled, a flicker of pride in her gaze, like my grandfather's when I'd balanced his books. The town wasn't just a stage for Marianne's lies. It was my ally, its whispers a weapon I could wield. I sat on her porch steps, the hospital bill crinkling in my pocket. Marianne's desperation was a chink in her armor, but her partner in this scheme, whoever they were, was the key to dismantling her plan. My mother's loan had kept me tethered, but these bills showed Marianne's weakness, a crack I could widen. I thought of my father, his quiet retreat to the garage, his refusal to meet my eyes. Was he the one she'd split profits with? Or was it someone else in the town, drawn into her promises of a new center? The community's Christmas spirit, its shared warmth, had masked their secrets, but it was also their undoing. Mrs. Delaney's support, Clara's warning, they were signs the town was waking up, seeing me not as the dutiful daughter but as the one who'd fought for them. I stood, the lights casting my shadow long across the snow. The bills, the will, the loan, they were my arsenal, each piece a step toward justice. Marianne thought her desperation was hidden, but I'd found it. My mother thought her manipulation was flawless, but I'd traced it. My father thought his silence was safe, but it was breaking. The town's traditions, its heart, were mine to protect, as my grandfather had intended. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for the truth, for the legacy they'd tried to steal. The attic of my grandfather's house was a maze of dust and shadows, its air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten things. I knelt among boxes, the hospital bills, Marianne's secret desperation, tucked in my coat alongside the will and loan agreement. Clara's warning about my sister's plan to split profits with someone close had set my mind ablaze, urging me to search the one place my family thought I'd never look. My fingers brushed a leather-bound journal, its cover etched with my grandfather's initials, hidden beneath a pile of Christmas decorations. I opened it, my banker's precision scanning the pages, and found a letter in Marianne's handwriting. Its ink fresh and deliberate, an agreement with a developer, promising to sell the house and split the profits with my mother. My heart thudded, not with shock but with cold clarity. This was the proof, the final thread of their betrayal. The letter detailed everything. Marianne would clear her debts, my mother would fund her image, and they'd leave me with nothing. My years of sacrifice erased. My sister's careful script, her lawyer's precision, was a confession of greed, penned as if I'd never find it. My mother, the woman who'd raised me to be dutiful, wasn't just complicit, she was a partner. Her loan a stepping stone to this deal. My father's silence, his retreat to the garage, wasn't ignorance, it was acquiescence, letting them rewrite my place in this family. I thought of my grandfather, his hands guiding mine as we hung Christmas lights, his voice promising I'd always belong. Had he hidden this journal here, knowing I'd search? The letter was a blade, cutting through their lies, but it also raised a question. Why hide it in his attic, a place tied to his legacy? I slipped the journal into my coat. My tutor's calm masking the storm inside. The attic shadows felt alive, whispering of the community's traditions, carols, shared warmth, ornaments, that my family sought to sell. I descended the creaking stairs, the house's familiar groans a reminder of what I'd fought for. Outside, Mrs. Delaney's porch light glowed across the street, a beacon of the town's growing support. I imagined confronting my mother in her pristine kitchen, holding up the letter. "You planned this with her," I'd say, watching her facade crack. But my banker's instinct stopped me. Evidence was power, but timing was everything. The will named me guardian, the loan exposed their manipulation, the bills showed Marianne's desperation, and now this letter confirmed their conspiracy. I needed to know who else was involved, that someone close Clara had overheard. I crossed to the town hall, its doors open for a Christmas planning meeting, the air thick with the scent of pine and coffee. Neighbors milled about, their voices low, their eyes flicking to me, Mrs. Delaney's warm, Mr. Coleman's knowing. The town was a jury, its whispers now a roar against Marianne's promises. A man at a table, a council member I'd tutored years ago, leaned toward his wife, his voice sharp. "Marianne's pushing hard for that sale. Says it's for the town's future." My grip tightened on my coat, the letter's weight grounding me. For the town? No, for her debts, her image, her power. My mother's role in this wasn't just control, it was profit, a betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. The community's Christmas spirit, its shared pies and lights, was being weaponized. But I'd turn it back on them. I sat at the edge of the meeting, my presence quiet but deliberate, like a ledger entry no one could ignore. Mrs. Delaney approached, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, her voice low. "Nora, people are talking. They're starting to see your sister's game." Her words were a spark, fanning the town's shift toward me. I nodded, my voice steady. "They'll see it all soon, Mrs. Delaney." She squeezed my arm, her eyes echoing my grandfather's trust. The town wasn't just watching, it was choosing sides, its traditions a battleground for truth. Marianne's letter was my checkmate, but I needed to know her partner's role. My mother's signature was there, but was there another? My father's silence, his avoidance, felt heavier now. Was he part of the split, or just a bystander? Enabling their plan, I left the hall, the winter air biting my cheeks as the square's lights cast long shadows. The letter changed everything, turning Marianne's desperation into a calculated pact, my mother's manipulation into a partnership. My grandfather's journal, hidden where only I'd look, was his final gift, a map to their deceit. I thought of my father, his tools clinking in the garage, his refusal to face me. Had he known about the letter, the deal? His silence was a choice, one I'd force him to confront. The community's whispers were now a chorus, their loyalty shifting to the one who'd paid, who'd stayed. Marianne thought her plan was flawless, my mother thought her control was absolute, but this letter was their mistake, a truth I'd wield like a blade. I stood under the Christmas lights, their glow sharp against the snow. The will, the loan, the bills, now this letter, they were my arsenal, each piece a step toward justice. My family thought they'd erased me, but I'd found their secrets, pieced together their lies. The town's heart, its traditions, belonged to me, as my grandfather intended. The courtroom's wooden benches creaked under the weight of neighbors, their Christmas lights once aglow around my grandfather's house, now a symbol of the legacy I'd fought to save. I stood before the judge, Marianne's letter, her plan to sell the house and split profits with my mother, tucked in my coat alongside the will, loan agreement, and hospital bills. Each piece was a scar, a proof of betrayal I'd uncovered in the attic shadows. Tom, the lawyer who'd taken my cause, slipped me a worn envelope, its edges soft with age, my grandfather's handwriting bold across it. "This was in his private safe," he said, his voice low. I opened it, my banker's precision tracing the words, an unsent letter, naming me not just guardian of the house and fund, but the town's leader, chosen to carry its heart forward. My pulse steadied, not with victory but clarity. This was his final trust, one my family had buried to keep me invisible. Marianne sat across the room, her polished mask gone, her eyes darting to my mother, whose hands gripped her chair, knuckles white. The letter's words burned. My grandfather had seen my resolve, my strength, when my family saw only a tool. Then Marianne stood, her voice breaking as she faced the judge. "I needed the money," she confessed, her words sharp, like a thread snapping. "The house, the council seat, it was for my future." My mother's head bowed, her silence an admission, her role in the profit-sharing deal laid bare. My father's absence, his retreat to the garage, was its own verdict. He'd enabled their lies, letting me carry their weight. The town's whispers, once Marianne's shield, turned to murmurs of shock, their loyalty now mine as they saw her ambition for what it was, a desperate theft of my sacrifice. The judge's gavel fell, granting me the house and fund, but the room's air shifted as Mrs. Delaney stood, her voice firm. "Nora's our leader," she declared, her knitting hands steady, sparking nods from Clara, Mr. Coleman, and the crowd. The community's Christmas spirit, carols, shared warmth, ornaments, became a mandate, their traditions no longer Marianne's stage but my legacy. My sister's dreams of power, her counsel bid, crumbled under her own words. My mother's manipulation, my father's silence, they'd built a facade on my back, but the town saw me, the one who'd fought, who'd stayed. The letter wasn't just a gift. It was a call I'd answered, step by calculated step, from the attic's dust to this courtroom's light. I stepped outside, the winter air sharp, the square's Christmas tree glinting under its lights. My family's betrayal, my mother's control, my father's silence, Marianne's greed, had carved me open, but I'd rebuilt myself, piece by piece. The attic's journal, the truths I'd unearthed, the community's whispers turning to my side, each was a battle, won not with anger but with precision, my banker's mind and tutor's patience my strength. The town, once their stage, became my foundation, its heart mine to protect. I stood by the tree, its ornaments reflecting my resolve, and looked back on the war I'd waged. My family had tried to erase me, but I'd claimed their secrets, turning their lies into my truth. The lesson wasn't about forgiveness or vengeance. It was colder, truer. Family can cut you deepest, but their betrayal doesn't own you, you do. I'd carried their burdens, thinking duty defined me, but each truth I found, hidden in journals, whispered by allies, taught me to trust my own strength, to see through their masks. For those wounded by kin, know this: your sacrifices aren't invisible unless you let them be. Unearth the truth, grip it like iron, and build your own path. To anyone who's felt erased, I say, stand tall, claim your worth, and let it reshape you. The scars don't fade, but they sharpen your sight, guiding you to a place stronger than their deceit. The town's lights, once a backdrop to my pain, now shine for me, and I'll carry their glow forward. If my fight resonates, subscribe for the next story of reclaiming truth. Let's keep shining light on what's right.